The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer greatly from the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. Then Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. God forbid, Lord, no such thing shall ever happen to you. He turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan, you are an obstacle to me. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do. Then Jesus said to his disciples, Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What profit would there be for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? Or what can one man give in exchange for his life? For the Son of Man will come with his angels in his Father's glory, and then he will repay all according to his conduct. The Gospel of the Lord. One of my fellow freshman English teachers and I used the same two short stories when we begin the year. I actually borrowed them from him. And one of them is a story of two merchants who live in Baghdad. And one day, these two merchants who are friends, all of a sudden, one of them comes to the other and says, I must leave the city immediately. I'm going to Samara. I recently was in the marketplace and I encountered death. And death gave me a look that I knew he was going to take my life, and so I must leave right now. I'm leaving immediately. Please take care of my affairs for me while I'm gone. I'm going to Samara. And so this other friend who remains in Baghdad is deeply intrigued that death is in his city. And so he goes to the marketplace where his friend had said death was traveling or staying. And he goes and he greets death with some fear and trepidation and says, Death, you've just threatened my friend, and he's now run away because he thought you were going to take his life today. He said, when I saw him, I wasn't, and Death responds, I wasn't threatening him. I was just surprised to see him here in Baghdad since I have an appointment with him tonight in Samara. And this is a great, short story to express just the inevitability of death, of fate, and it brings up all sorts of great questions for freshmen about freedom, and do we really choose anything, or is it all sort of mapped out for us? And you can imagine how an adolescent mind grabs onto this and just can't let go. And so it's a great way to begin an English class freshman year. But I think that story, right, of the inevitability of death and of our attempts to run away from it, I think that's also perhaps illustrative of how we might understand the passage of today's gospel, that Peter is running away. He's running away from suffering and death. He thinks that he can somehow escape it, that his own plans, his own love for the Lord is going to somehow save him from suffering and death. And Jesus is, I think, instructing him and his disciples and all of us in showing us that running away from death is foolishness, right? Death is going to find us, suffering is going to find us, and running away only makes us look like fools. But instead, if we embrace this fact that we are going to die, it can give a great poignancy to our life. It can make our life actually deeply meaningful because we have a short time. And that short time means each day of my life is deeply meaningful. I only have a finite number of days left. And therefore, the day that the Lord gives me today is one of these precious days of my life that is given to me in order to love my neighbor, to know God, to become the person God asked me to be. It has meaning. It's also, I think, a remedy for us when we can be wrapped up in our own plans, that I have to have my plan of what my year is going to look like, of what my semester is going to look like as an English teacher, that I'm making plans about, wouldn't it be great if this were the case? Maybe I can somehow advocate for this or that so that my plans can come about. And I think the invitation for us today is instead to recognize the Lord gives me today. The Lord gives me these particular people in my life, this particular situation, in order to make the very best of it that I can. And if my life is taken from me tomorrow, or 10 years from now, or 50 years from now, or 100 years from now, will I be pleased by how I've lived the day today? This is, I think, the model that Jesus holds up for us of what the cross is, or what our cross is. So often we think of the cross as suffering, and I think that's true. It is suffering. It is carrying a burden, perhaps of a wound that we carry our whole life, and we can't let it down. It's something that the Lord asks us to carry in order that we can learn fidelity, in order that we can learn that suffering is not what defines us, but the Lord and our relationship with him and the way that we allow our suffering to be transformed into an act of love. This can be deeply meaningful for us. But the cross is not merely suffering. The cross is also Jesus holding out his hands and saying, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Father, into your hands I commend all my plans. I commend all of my self-will, all of my ability to understand and discern and choose. Father, I give you all of this. Into your hands I commend it all. I think this is what ultimately the cross is about, is relinquishing the tight grip of control over death and life, over how I imagine my life will go, and instead simply to accept that the Lord gives me the grace today to do what is required and to know him. Let's pray that we can receive this as good news and so live our lives in freedom and perhaps even joy, even when we are on the cross.